Found in the Kivalliq region, Anjikuni Lake is one of many rivers created by glaciers spanning the Canadian Shield. Set in one of the most isolated and challenging locations on Earth, the lake covers about 500 square kilometers. Accessible only by dog sled, kayak, or on foot, requiring days of travel across challenging terrain, this area was part of the Northwest Territories in 1930. The nearest permanent settlement with telegraph capabilities was days apart by challenging travel, and the area stayed frozen from October to May. Joe LaBelle, a Canadian fur trapper, was the man who would draw public attention to this enigma. Fur trapping demanded a thorough awareness of the country, animal behavior, and the capacity to live in solitude for several days in 1930. Often dependent on native communities for assistance, trappers like LaBelle exchanged commodities and knowledge of events outside the area. LaBelle arrived at the Inuit settlement near Anjikuni Lake expecting the familiar sights and sounds, smoke rising from chimneys, sled dogs, and people going about their daily routines according to the account revealed. Instead, he found absolute quiet. Though at first sight the town looked untouched with structures still standing and personal possessions left behind, there were no signs of life. LaBelle's study exposed what he termed to be a scenario frozen in time. Unfinished sewing projects were discovered, with needles still strung in the material. It followed that work had been stopped abruptly. Now cold, meals hung above fire pits were still unopened in the houses together with personal items that no Inuit would abandon intentionally. Most disrupted, LaBelle found the condition of the sled dogs. Found starved and still bound to their posts, these animals vital for transport and survival in the Arctic were dead. This detail hinted at something terrible had happened for anybody acquainted with Inuit culture. Sled dogs were essential Arctic lifelines, not just animals. Their leaves suggested either utter need or something far more sinister. LaBelle found graves in the neighborhood cemetery, usually marking and guarding the burial locations. The stones had been painstakingly moved and stacked. The methodical character of the disturbance, because the stones were precisely organized, ruled out animal interference or natural factors, added considerably to the mystery surrounding this. Following usual protocol for such extraordinary finds, LaBelle went to the closest communication point and notified the Royal Canadian Mounted Police of his discoveries. Jurisdiction over the vast Northern Territories and frequent investigation of strange occurrences in isolated regions belonged to the Canada's Federal Police Agency. The Danville Bee, a Virginia newspaper, first recorded publicly of these occurrences on November 27, 1930, written by Emmett E. Kelleher of the newspaper Enterprise Association. The article described Joe LaBelle's finding of an unused Inuit settlement. The camp had 6 tents, and 25 guys, women, and children vanished without comment. These first thorough reports of the inexplicable disappearance in the media sparked public interest throughout Canada and beyond. According to current media stories, the RCMP opened an inquiry into the disappearance. Officers corroborated several of LaBelle's remarks, including the neglected settlement, undisturbed personal possessions, and the disturbing condition of the graveyard. Based on the condition of the site and the condition of the dead sled dogs, the probe further showed that the residents had been missing for around 8 weeks before LaBelle's discovery. The RCMP ran across more witness testimony during their inquiry. Armand Laurent, a trapper, said along with his 2 boys to have seen strange aerial phenomena in the days leading up to the finding. Based on their account, they saw a brilliant cylindrical object moving over the sky, which appeared to change shape as it flew from a cylinder to a bullet-like form as it traveled toward Anjikuni Lake. But the official reaction to these claims was totally different. Sergeant J. Nelson of the RCMP filed an internal report in January 1931 that was subsequently made public. Nelson remarked in this paper that he saw no foundation for this narrative. He also wondered if Joe LaBelle had ever visited the territories before, pointing out that LaBelle had acquired his first trapping license that season. He also noted that one of the photos used in Kelleher's narrative was dated to 1909, and that Kelleher was known for writing vibrant stories. The official denial produced a major conflict between the RCMP's position and the newspaper accounts. Therefore, the public had to wonder what really occurred. Though Frank Edwards' book Stranger Than Science brought it back in 1959, the case might have stayed a little historical footnote. In his compendium of unsolved mysteries, Edwards, an American broadcaster fascinated by supernatural events, included a comprehensive account of the Anjikuni Lake vanishing. Expanding upon the initial accounts, his interpretation of the story painted a hamlet of 30 people and dramatic details regarding the scene LaBelle purportedly came across. Wide interest in Edwards's book brought the case to a new generation of readers. His story portrayed a community that had disappeared mid-activity, leaving half-cooked dinners and unfinished chores, not just the abandonment of the village. The popularity of the book guaranteed the ongoing dissemination and development of the narrative in popular culture. Writers Roger Bohr and Nigel Blundell released an article in 1984 that linked the Anjikuni Lake disappearance to extraterrestrial phenomena. Their narrative speculated that the missing people could have been victims of extraterrestrial abductions, and included reports of strange lights in the sky. This reading drew UFO investigators and fans' interest. Different facts were either embellished or changed as the narrative traveled across the years. Some versions presented tales of military cover-ups or government conspiracies, while others alleged over 1,000 people had gone missing. Though the specifics frequently varied greatly between reports, the fundamental components of the narrative remained constant. Researcher Brian Dunning of the Skeptoid podcast thoroughly examined the Anjikuni Lake disappearance in 2013. Looking at the historical and geographic proof around the case, Dunning's study examined both the initial news coverage and the ecological setting of the said events. His work questioned the credibility of the narrative as it had been told. Dunning brought up several aspects questioning the conventional story. First, the timing of the purported vanishing in November would have meant that Anjikuni Lake was totally frozen, therefore rendering the presence of kayaks on the shore very doubtful. Second, the site of the lake made it an improbable place for the kind of permanent Inuit settlement detailed in the reports. Dunning's study, additionally, underlined the sparsely inhabited character of the area in 1930. Among the most isolated and unpopulated areas of North America, Anjikuni Lake's surroundings made the existence of a large-scale permanent settlement uncertain. Limited resources and extreme natural conditions would have made it challenging to support a population of the size shown in several interpretations of the story. The case is seen critically from the geographical and cultural background of the area. Seasonal migration was practiced by conventional Inuit settlements in the Arctic. While summer villages concentrated on fishing, caribou hunting, and gathering, communities in the winter months usually built more permanent camps close to seal hunting grounds on sea ice. Surviving in the Arctic setting depended on this seasonal movement. At particular times of the year, communities would often split into little family units, spreading over the terrain to maximize available resources. This conventional movement pattern runs counter to recorded Inuit cultural customs regarding a big continuous settlement at one interior location. Furthermore, the founding of permanent settlements among Inuit people was mostly a 20th century phenomenon spurred by contact with European merchants, missionaries, and government representatives. Historically unsure is the existence of a large permanent settlement at Anjikuni Lake in 1930. The Canadian government's attempts to settle nomadic people into set communities mostly started after that year. The Anjikuni Lake disappearance is an urban myth devoid of actual support, according to modern RCMP. Official statements from the organization verify that they lack records of any strange incidents or mass disappearances in the vicinity during the 1930s. The RCMP contend that the narrative began as made-up amusement that was then taken to be actual. Anjikuni Lake is still as remote and underdeveloped as it was in 1930. Set in 1999 to offer self-governance for Inuit peoples, the area belongs to Nunavut, Canada's newest territory. Nunavut is among the least inhabited areas on Earth, with a population density of barely 0.2 people per square kilometer. The bulk of its almost 37,000 people reside in 25 founded villages, none of which are situated near Anjikuni Lake. Most investigators have decided the mystery is fictional because of the absence of official paperwork supporting the mass disappearance, as well as the geographical and cultural elements that make such an occurrence improbable. The lack of solid evidence either way, however, means the case remains technically open. What may be verified is that a newspaper article published in November 1930 said a fur trapper had found an abandoned Inuit village close to Anjikuni Lake. published in several North American newspapers and distributed by a wire agency. This narrative is still under discussion, whether the events described in that story really happened, or whether they reflected sensationalist journalism or fiction offered as fact. Finally, what is your opinion on the matter? Do you think the story was true, or is it just another urban myth?